greater gift? And what's the greater gift? That's what chapter 13 is.
Yeah, that's what it says right here.
Yeah.
It's a real short chapter, too.
Yeah. Now see, just because Glenda had that read at her wedding, we think that that's something about weddings. And that's not what that's about. Oh, you did?
Who did?
I don't know who did that crazy thing.
I mean,
Yeah, but we, because we read at weddings, we think that that's what this is. No, it's about spiritual gifts. Love is, first of all, not only is love a spiritual gift, Paul says it's the greatest spiritual gift.
it sure is.
And why is it a spiritual gift? Let's come down to verse 4. It's patient, kind, does not envy, is not boastful, is not conceited, does not act improperly, is not selfish, is not provoked. Yeah, try doing all that on your own. For that matter, on your own, try loving your neighbor as yourself. Yeah, especially all the, yeah. See, to love in the way that God instructs us to love, that can't come from within ourselves. Love like this only comes from God. So we add this one. So we add love to the list. So you got 13 now. Okay, you got 13. I had 12 on the sheet, but I can't count. So we had 13. Now, there are two other lists in Scripture. One in Romans, one in Ephesians. And we'll look at those at a different time. But out of 1 Corinthians, we have, what did I just say?
13.
14?
Because he added love.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So out of 1 Corinthians, we got 14. There are about 3 in Ephesians 4 and another 5 or 6 in Romans. But just out of 1 Corinthians, there are 14. And the ones in 1 Corinthians make up the bulk of the list. Okay? And at a different time, we can look at all the others. All right, any questions so far? Let's go back to chapter 12. We're in chapter 12, aren't we? Let's go back up. Someone read verse 12 through 26.
Chapter 12?
Yep,
12 to what?
12 to 26.
The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts, and though all its parts are many, they form one body. So it is with Christ, for we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free. And we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. And if the ear should say, Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body. It would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty. While our presentable parts need no special treatment, but God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it.
All right. So let's look at what was going on in Corinth. Now remember, we opened Corinth by saying, in chapters 1 through 4, that there was this division in the church because people were, into little cliques. This group over here like Paul, this group over here like Apollos, another group like Peter, right? And then we saw this another division in the church because people were showing up for the communion meal, the evening meal. Some were getting there early so that they eat up all the food, drink up all the wine before everybody else get there. Here's another division in the church. This thing called gifts. Because I had the gift of prophecy and you only had the gift of help, well, mine is better than yours, so I'm better than you, and they were doing all that kind of stuff. And Paul says there is one body, but many parts. The eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you. The hand can't say to the leg, I don't need you. But they all fit together in one body. Right? And Paul says there should be no division in the body. Let's go to chapter 14. And someone read the first 4 verses.
Pursue love and desire spiritual gifts, and especially that you may prophesy. For the person who speaks in another tongue is not speaking to people but to God, since no one understands him. He speaks mysteries in the Spirit. You didn't say how do I go with it?
Go to 4.
On the other hand, the person who prophesies speaks to people for their strengthening, encouragement, and consolation. The person who speaks in another tongue builds himself up, but the one who prophesies builds up the church.
All right. So notice that Paul says in 2 places here, verses 3 and 4, that, well, he's speaking about prophecy, but really the purpose of the gifts is for the edification or for the building up of the church. Okay? Paul's speaking about prophecy in tongues for a specific reason. But really, all of the gifts are given to build up and edify the church. And when all of the gifts are operated in the church, then the church not only is functioning in the Spirit, it is edifying God and its members, because all of the gifts are functioning in the way in which God has called them to function.
I'm confused.
Okay.
The first 4 verses of chapter 14, it sounds like Paul is speaking about two different kinds of tongues.
He is. I said I'd get to that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
So see, the first part I want to pull out of that is that the gifts are given for edification.
Oh, okay.
Right? Gifts are given for edification. So that, prophecy, tongues, helps, healings, all of those, they're given to edify the church and to build up the church.
But it says here, he's not speaking to people, but to God.
Yeah, I'll get to that. Okay. So all the gifts are for the building up of the church. Remember I said they were using the gifts to boast and say mine is better than yours? No, that's not why they're given. They're given to edify the church. And all of the gifts, there are many gifts, but one body. So they all use together to edify the church. Now, everyone got that? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me get to the other point. Remember, love is the greatest gift? Mm-hmm. So Paul says pursue love. And then Paul says choose prophecy. And the reason he says choose prophecy is because the people who spoke in tongues thought they were better than anybody else. Yeah, because they could speak in tongues. Yeah. Right. Paul says, but wait a minute. If you speak in tongues, nobody knows what you're saying. If you prophesy, then we are all edified. So that prophecy is a greater gift than tongues, because tongues only is between the person and God. In verse 4 it says, the person who speaks in another language builds himself up, but the one who prophesies builds up the church. In verse 2 it says that person speaks in another language speaking to men, but to God, since no one understands him, however he speaks mysteries in the spirit. It's sometimes difficult to see which Paul is talking about. There is a prayer language, and there's also the ability to speak in a human language. Okay? So that on the day of Pentecost, when there were people from Pamphylia and Phrygia all in Galilee together, all in Jerusalem together, and these Galileans who couldn't even speak proper Aramaic were speaking languages from everywhere else around the world. How did they do that? Well, that was the gift from God from that day. All right? On the other hand, there is a prayer language that one speaks between themselves and God. Just so happens that the translation for both of those is tongues. Yeah. The way to translate both of those is to use the word tongues. Right? But when one speaks tongues, it's not for the edification of the church, edification of the person.
What if it was another earthly language?
That doesn't necessarily edify the church. Come down to verse, where am I? (26). Mike, you ask, you read. 26 to 33.
What then shall we say, brothers and sisters, when you come together? Each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Everything must be done so that the church may be built up. If anyone speaks in a tongue, 2 or at the most 3 should speak one at a time, and someone must interpret. If there is no interpreter, the speaker should keep quiet in the church and speak to himself and to God. 2 or 3 prophets should speak, and the others should weigh carefully what is said. And if a revelation comes to someone who is sitting down, the first speaker should stop. For you can all prophesy in turn, so that everyone may be instructed and encouraged.
Going to 33.
The spirits of prophets are subject to the control of prophets. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the congregation of the Lord's people.
So now, I mentioned earlier that there is Paul speaks of controlling your use of gifts. Okay? That there isn't confusion if everyone's up speaking in tongues. No. Everyone giving prophecy. Certainly everyone can't be healed. Paul says that we should do these things in order. So if no one is here to interpret, speak to yourself. If only 1 or 2 persons can give prophecy. If someone has a revelation, the one who is speaking should be quiet. And nobody understands what benefit is it to the rest of the congregation.
I wonder why some ministers feel like praying in tongues without interpretation is helpful, because
I didn't say that. Paul said that.
that's sad. Now I had a buddy, and he was very sick, and on his deathbed, his wife and his mother was there, and his mother had some friends from her church come into the hospital room and pray for him. I wasn't there, so his mother was telling me she didn't understand why his wife could have a problem with her having her church friends come in and pray for her husband, who was the mother's son. She couldn't understand, and she's just going on about what a horrible thing the daughter did. So I spoke to the guy's wife afterwards. She told me that her mother had these 3 ladies come into her husband's hospital room where he's laying in the bed, and they just walk over to the bed, and they're holding his hand on each side, and they just start praying in tongues. She doesn't know any of these women. She doesn't know what church they're from. She has no idea who they're praying to. She has no idea what they're saying. So she put a halt to it. And I didn't understand why the mother was so upset until the wife explained to me the situation. Now I understand. That was out of order, right, Dr. B?
Give me a moment.
She didn't know what spirit they were operating.
She had no idea what they were saying.
They didn't either, bro.
I mean, they could have been perfectly a good prayer, but how could she know?
They all were speaking at the same
she could have been
time.
saying anything, because she's speaking a language that makes no sense to her.
She should have bought a Honda, probably.
All right, so you raised the question. I'm going to find it right here in chapter 14.
I just want to. Is that out of order?
Wait a minute. Oh, all right. Here I am. Still in chapter 14, verse 22. Well, I'll read it. It follows that speaking in other languages is intended as a sign, not for believers, but for unbelievers. But prophecy is not for unbelievers, but for believers. Therefore, if the whole church assembles together and all are speaking in another language, and people who are uninformed or unbelievers come in, will they not say that you are out of your minds? But if all are prophesying and some unbeliever or uninformed person comes in, he is convicted by all and is judged by all. So this is why Paul says that you should have an interpreter. Okay? And this is why Paul says that there's no one to interpret. One should be quiet.
So to answer his question, they were out of line.
He didn't say it. Paul said it.
I just like a yes or no. Answer his question.
For the purpose of Facebook and YouTube.
It was not, as Paul says, done in decency and order. Okay? You know, this is why we have to both be able to discern our gifts, but also, you know, there is a proper use of gifts. And there is a proper time for the use of gifts. And just because I have it doesn't mean I need to be using it.
Yeah, see, that's because when the mother was telling me about that situation, I'm wondering, this is her husband, and he's laying in the hospital bed. And so the mother brings her church friends in to pray for him with the wife there. Why would they even pray in tongues? I don't even understand it. Why would you? I don't even see how they could think that would be helpful. That's.
Well, I wouldn't have done so without speaking to the wife first. I wouldn't just bring someone else into someone else's room. You know, but here again, Paul says that all of the gifts are used to build up the church and are to be done in order. If there is not order, then it is not proper. Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna say, no, people say, be careful who you ask to pray for you.
I'm not sure about that. Ms. Ford wants to know, is that why people say you should be careful who you ask to pray for you? I'm not sure about that. I mean, just, you know.
I wonder why they say that. Does that mean that something might be wrong with it? They may not be a Christian or.
They may not be, I don't know. Depends on who you're referring to. I don't know where Mike was last night.
I got a question.
Yes.
So can the speaker interpret the tongues themselves? Do they understand what they're saying?
I've seen that happen as well.
So is that a double gift?
Well, there's nothing that says that only one person can have one gift. Okay? And the other thing about gifts is that they are given at a point in time that God sees fit to give them. Okay? That I claim none for myself. But at various times in my ministry, I have operated out of one or another. So that at various times, God, I try to avail myself that God can use me at any point. So that I don't claim to possess, but at various points in the ministry, God might use me to do various things.
Will that be considered a miracle if God gives you a certain gift, like spontaneously?
I don't consider it a miracle. I just want to be, available for whenever God needs for me.
Just to be a vessel, basically.
That's all. See, that's all it really is. This is why it's a gift, because it doesn't come from the individual. There's nothing that the individual can do to either obtain it or to make use of it. It all comes from God. And at any particular point in time, God can choose to cause Belinda to speak in tongues. And at any other point in time, God can choose to use you to pray for somebody. And point in time God used me. That's, you know, God's choice. This is why they're gifts. They're given by grace. All right. I'm at 8. Questions? Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, I guess, doctors come out of the healing.
Doctors come out of healing.
Oh, no.
Healing, not necessarily.
Doctors have nothing to do with it. Doctors are human medicine.
That's training, right?
Yeah, doctors are human medicine. Healing comes when for that which human medicine cannot avail.
That's why they call it practice.
Okay. You know, if you go to the doctor and you have hypertension, and you are placed on, you know, proper blood pressure medication, all right, I wouldn't call that healing. Healing is when someone prays for you and you no longer have hypertension. Or if you saw my Facebook post last night, I had dinner last night with a guy whose sister had some kind of condition that the doctors could not explain how she had it, but she lost all use of her hands and legs. And she had been to every doctor. No one could explain it. No one could diagnose it. No one knew what the problem was. And he worked with a group of people who were Christians, went to a particular church in town. And he said he would just walked over to them and asked for them to pray for his sister. And then a couple of weeks later, his sister calls him to tell him that she's going dancing. And he thought that she was teasing him or putting on. So she put her cousin on the phone, and her cousin said, yes, she is now up, she's walking. We don't know what happened, but we're going dancing. See, that's healing. That's healing. Yeah, that too. Okay, you see, that's different from going to the doctor and just getting your blood pressure medication. Yeah.
That's just true.
I guess we're gonna ask,
Kickback
when I
from
was,
the
when I was in
pharmaceutical
rehab,
company.
They're not all bad.
There was a broken off place, and they kept calling doctors, orthos, whatever, trying to decide whether to do surgery or what to do, you know, whatever. And then one doctor came down, and he told them that he said he was a believer in God, and I have no reason, you know. He told them, but because I couldn't move at all, I couldn't turn, I couldn't get off the bed, I couldn't do anything for myself. I just had to lay on my back all the time. And he said that he would just let God do it. That's what he said to me and to them. Okay, so technically I really did have to learn to walk again, because you know, I was at rehab and I had to go in and if my foot fell off the bed, I just put it back, somebody had come, you know, and all that. And there was a young girl there who, and I think she said she fell or something other and broke one of her bones in her leg or whatever. Kept debating on her, so they finally did surgery on her. And then I didn't see her for a long time, because she had so much pain and stuff. And I saw her maybe about 2 years after the surgery, whatever, and I was walking fine, because I had gone back to work and everything. She was still having such a hard time. She said she's been back to the doctor, been back, you know, and she kept saying maybe she should have changed the doctor to, you know, to one that believes in God. And I told her I can't, you know, I couldn't say for sure that
It really has nothing to do with whether or not the doctor believes in God. It really has to do with whether or not God chooses to exercise the particular gift of healing at a particular point in time. Okay? So that, I mean, modern medicine can do a lot of things, but there's some things modern medicine cannot do.
That's true.
You know? And whether or not God chooses to touch a particular person at a particular point in time is solely the grace of God.
And they don't have to be
Yes.
believers to get the gift, right? They don't have to be believers to
You
receive
have
it.
to be a believer to exercise the gift. You do not have to be a believer to receive the gift. Or let me rephrase that. You have to be a believer to have one of the gifts of the Spirit that we're talking about now. You do not have to be a believer for someone to pray for you and you be healed.
Okay, just a quick question. In reference to Mama's situation though, wouldn't it still be a part of treatment? Because that doctor also knew there was no need of putting her in a body cast, which was gonna keep her still, because she couldn't move anyway.
I'm not sure I can answer because I don't know enough about what.
No, I'm saying that.
No, I wouldn't know enough
Yeah.
anyway, no matter how you explain
But
it.
that's what I'm saying, the body cast would have been to keep her.
It would,
mobile.
yeah, it would make her
She
atrophy.
couldn't move anyway, so she was already immobile without the body cast. The decision was just not to do the surgery and put her in the body cast. So isn't it part of treatment as well? I'm just asking. Okay. I believe it was a miracle that you were healed the way you were, but I just wondered.
I just don't know. Okay, because when you start talking about those kinds of things, I get squeamish.
I need. Yeah.
I don't want you to give me any details or anything. Just keep it very basic and simple.
Sometimes it's still on the map.
But that God does heal, yes.
Yes.
And God heals when God chooses to do so.
But those you get to that.
God does that when God chooses to do so. Any other questions tonight? I was giving my final lecture, third lecture that was down the High Point last night, and just as we were about to close, the minister got up and said that he'd received an alert on his phone about the shooting down in Charlotte. And as soon as I could get to my phone, I called Lisa, and that's when I found out